So I saw Alex Garland's Civil War this weekend, and I saw it on a big screen. I saw it at the Regal RPX screen in Union Square with a big crowd. It had really good sound. I honestly do recommend seeing it on the big screen. And what really stuck out to me was that this is a movie that's being played for a large audience. I find that kind of interesting because it's not your typical blockbuster. You know, this is a movie that is A24's highest budgeted film. It costs $50 million, where the last movie that was really expensive for them was Beau is Afraid, which was $35 million to make. So I kind of am assuming they really want people to see this on the big screen, but also they're, if you watch the marketing for this or see the trailers, it's being billed as this big action film. I don't really think it is this big action film, but they definitely are trying to put those asses into seats, and it is working based on the crowd I saw it with. It was a very reactive crowd, very fun to watch a movie with a lot of people. People might have gone into this thinking this was going to be like an action movie like Olympus Has Fallen or White House Down or something like that, like generic popcorn action. But to me, if anything, it did remind me more of Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, with how it takes a comic undertone, rock music, a big notable cast, and tries to put this horrible display of war into all of that and just show you how it dehumanizes people. That's just not how I expected to go see an A24 movie with. Usually, they are smaller audiences. Depends on the theater you're seeing it in. But this has a really big cast. You have Jesse Plemons, you have Kirsten Dunst, Kaylee Spaney, Wagner Moura, Nick Offerman. A lot of people, are in this. Stephen McKinley Henderson has kind of gotten a cult following. So I wanted to review this film and let you know what I thought of this film. So it's directed by Alex Garland, and he's a filmmaker that really loves to draw interest to his movies, particularly from people who like to discuss film. I think there's always going to be those people discussing film like you and I, but then again, there are more modern blockbuster filmmakers like Michael Bay and Steven Spielberg and even Quentin Tarantino who know how to mass-produce films for all audiences. There's a select group of directors like Ari Aster, kind of Wes Anderson. I mean, he's kind of bigger now. But I also want to say Alex Garland, and these guys know how to cultivate interest for their films, but they really have this unique perspective that isn't going to translate to your typical huge movie audience. No, this is an interesting experience that people like to discuss, to analyze. And a lot of Alex Garland's films are like that. I've seen all of his films in the theater except for Men, which I kind of regret not watching in the theater. His films Annihilation and Ex Machina were both very different. And Ex Machina was more of a tight-paced crowd pleaser. I think that was one of his more commercial films. It was his first film. And it was very satisfying. It definitely kicked off A24's brand. It was one of their first major movies that appealed to a lot of people, both fans of the sci-fi film and independent cinema, and just thrillers in general. Loved it. It definitely makes sense why it established Alex Garland's great relationship with the studio. I remember seeing Annihilation in the theater, and it was exactly what I expected it to be. It totally subverted my expectations. I was not expecting Star Wars or some fun sci-fi film like Predator. It was a really disturbing, hallucinogenic film. I saw this with only two other people in the theater, a father and son, who left halfway through the movie because there was this really particularly disturbing, gross-out sequence during the film. And it just really wasn't your typical sci-fi film. I think what highlights Alex Garland's art is that he's offering this unique view, and it's always going to be on a genre that's kind of different. Like he did Devs, he did Annihilation, Ex Machina, all sci-fi, and then there was Men, which was kind of a break from that. It was kind of an independent, smaller movie. I still don't really even know what Men was about. But now with Civil War, it's a clear commentary on war, on how people are affected by war, dehumanized to it, and it's set in this dystopic future USA. It's very different from what he's done before. And I really did enjoy this movie. It was entertaining to see in the theater. It was well shot, it had a great cast, and like all of Alex Garland's films, there's this David Fincher-esque moody style to it. The world feels very clinical and cold, but there's still these 3D characters who, might be flawed, but the characters are there. I did want to like Civil War a little more. I think the fact that the characters, are a bit flawed and sometimes we don't get too much exposition to them, too much background. I think there's a double-edged sword to that. You could have the characters have background, and they do give their characters a little bit of background here, but sometimes they just kind of move on from that. And I think it is a double-edged sword. I think, you're kind of just moving on. You're not dwelling on certain things, but it could be a little better. The film follows a group of journalists who are war photographers traveling from New York in a road trip to DC to interview the president. Kirsten Dunst is a veteran war photographer named Lee Smith. Kaylee Spaney plays this girl Jessie, who's also a photographer who happens to run into her at this riot. They meet up. She's totally fangirling over her. Wagner Moura is one of Kirsten Dunst's associates. They're both journalists too. Stephen McKinley Henderson plays the older journalist who's with them. And the characters are, they work. There's chemistry there. I kind of was, involved in their story. I was invested. And the film really does have this grandiose indie vibe that leads up to this. We're waiting for this gradual moment when they meet the president, and there's this tension as they take this long journey to get to DC. Now, some of the issues I had with the film was that. It was exactly the tension. I was wondering to myself, who is this movie for? Because I saw this with a big audience. This is one of those films that being advertised as being seen to be on a big screen, and I don't know, there's just something a little weird about that. I mean, the last films that were released in IMAX theaters were Godzilla x Kong and Dune 2, two massive, crowd-pleasing blockbusters. One was pretty well crafted as a serious sci-fi film, and one just kind of pretty well crafted as dumb, meandering entertainment. I like both of those films. There's nothing wrong with that. They were both fun. But where Civil War, I love seeing it on the biggest screen as possible. It just felt a little odd to be marketed as a film you could literally watch in a 4D theater where the seats will shake you. That's kind of a novelty thing, especially when you consider this isn't like fun violence, like Scar King throwing a building at King Kong. It's a pretty gritty and visceral and disturbing movie. I mean, they restaged these pretty graphic images of war. And I didn't see this in a 4D theater, but it just feels like there's something strange about seeing this in a packed theater where, there's literally scenes of people being tortured. I'm wondering, though, why people turned up for this movie. Was it the A24 brand? Was it because the cast was packed? Was it the promise of a good old action film in the era of superhero fatigue? What was it that drew people in? Either way, it was an interesting film to see in IMAX, but still an entertaining film nonetheless. I really loved the use of sound in this. The way it builds up to its ending, too, is really great. I mean, structurally, this movie works pretty well. It's a relatively quiet film, and the ending is incredibly loud and visceral. It gets really tense near the end. It isn't really that abrupt. It just kind of builds up to that. You're following these journalists on this road trip where all sorts of crazy shit's happening, and it ends with a shootout set in the capital of DC with loud, insane imagery. I mean, it goes from a road trip film, little bits of tension scattered throughout, to this all-out war sequence. And I mean, I don't think that's a spoiler because it's kind of revealed in the trailer, but nowadays everything's revealed in the trailers. But I'll say it anyway. It really is just this relatively straightforward road trip that progresses into a full-on assault on DC, and it works. This is definitely where I understood wanting this film to be seen on an IMAX screen, with the use of vast explosions and large military vehicles. It definitely is the part that you understand wanting to see on a screen as big as possible, as opposed to, Challengers. It's coming up in IMAX, but I don't know. I hear that's very good, and we'll judge it next week when it comes out. But with Civil War, it really has this abrupt end, which I liked. It doesn't end with a long exposition speech or celebration or with music or fanfare or with the villains or heroes getting extended screen time to say what they all felt throughout, why I did what I did, or why this ending should feel earned. No, it just ends on a pretty interesting and dark note, and it just ends, and then the credits roll, and I liked the choice to do that. I was kind of expecting that, because this is one of those movies that it does entertain you. Throughout, there's all these interesting character beats. I like the chemistry, and I was definitely like, okay, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and then you get this full-on action scene, and then it just ends. I did like this choice. It was unconventional, but it works. Definitely as an independent film, I was expecting that. In the way the film slowly unpacks and builds on small moments. There's also these really cool needle drops of rock songs that punctuate the film. Alex Garland really did pick some bangers. I mean, I don't want to say it's just a vibes movie, but it is kind of. The story doesn't really have crazy deep commentary. It just is vibes to me. You're just watching these characters go about their lives. There's really cool music. There's some action scenes. You're watching them on a road trip. It's well shot. It's pretty, but it really, to me, wasn't that deep. And it could have been, I guess. I mean, the commentary seems like it would be really deep and really dark. The movie has a really great cast. Everyone does a great job. And I was happy the movie, didn't present, like I said earlier, fully fleshed out backstories. We do get a lot of information about certain characters, but it doesn't bombard you with exposition. It gives you everything you really need, which in some cases, with exposition, could you take you out of the immersion? And you're pretty much just on this journey with them. You're in their shoes as you go on this journey to DC. It's an indie road trip film. Even the members of my audience were saying that too. They were just saying, oh, that was a little nice road trip movie. After I heard in the Regal bathroom, people were just saying that. I definitely would have liked to see more. And, I don't know if I want to see more of the political aspects, like a ton more of it. But I kind of understand why people are critiquing why the movie didn't show the particular reasons, why there's like a civil war in this film. Like, what's the whole point? Why are we even in this war in the first place? And I understand the point's kind of just throwing you into this world where a lot of times in war, it's not really, about the basis of the conflict. It's really these horrible things that are happening and people are just trying to survive. But I do feel like there was something missing. We get these character moments with these journalists bonding. They're worried about what to expect in DC. They're smoking a joint. They're camping out under a bridge. They're visiting a camp where all these displaced families live, pretty much just to chill out. Then they're back on the road, and it's a lot of small moments interspersed with big ones. One moment they're getting high, talking about the day they have coming up, and the next scene, there's people shooting at them, and they have their little press helmets on, and they're going into a full war zone to kill some people. And honestly, it's good character development. You see how they go from reporters looking for a story to burnt out and horrified and traumatized veterans of war. And this is mostly through the relationship with Kirsten Dunst's character and Kaylee Spaney, who we meet early in the film. Kaylee Spaney is a young, eager journalist who's excited to see the world and get some cool shots in, but Kirsten Dunst is just haunted and traumatized, and she warns her of the toll this work will take on her. She doesn't even want her to tag along, but there's another journalist in their crew who's crushing on her and invited her a lot, because he just had a crush on her. And this does build for an interesting dynamic where we get to see the rookie team up with the veteran and slowly become exposed to something so horrible it takes a toll on them. But unlike a film like Come and See, which deals with a similar topic, this just doesn't hit as hard, and I think it's because of this film really doesn't have as many gruesome moments as it could have. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to see too much torture or death or anything too extremes. I just feel like it's almost a tease. It doesn't paint the full picture for this world. Take, for instance, the scene with Jesse Plemons, which is in all the trailers and really does highlight the strong moments of tension in the film. It's a great scene. Very tense, very nerve-wracking, showing how far people can go in a world where there's almost no rules anymore. The world has changed, and this scene shows it. But I believe there just needed to be a few more scenes like this, because as it stands, the tension is very minimal. It's all very nice set dressing, and I could see the point of, we just wanted to show what the world is like without being too overdramatic, and fine, sure, it just needed something else to latch onto. It's more like playing a video game where you're worried something bad is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. Or it does happen, but then we move on. It's not like there's any lingering tension because we keep moving to new set pieces. Like I said earlier, the choices to not make this extremely political, I think that's where the movie kind of splits up for me. I don't want it to be too heavy-handed, but at the same time, I just want a little more. I like that we don't really see two extreme sides of the conflict. It kind of leaves you wondering who's right and who's wrong. By sticking with the journalists, you kind of have this median view. They say these Western forces are trying to take over the White House and kill the president, but we really don't get a deep insight into what any of these Western forces are or what they want to do, and maybe that's not the point. Maybe we're supposed to be kind of wondering like who's right and who's wrong, but I still did want something more. I wanted to kind of see more. And I was thinking of Full Metal Jacket the whole movie. This really kind of reminded me of that film with just the stylistic choices, from the music to the action scenes to the way they presented this film's characters. And, there's a bit of comedy in there. It really did remind me of Full Metal Jacket. This could have been a little more interesting. It has great themes of people in war, people being exposed to all these horrible situations, and how they go from eager journalists to being shell-shocked almost. But I just wanted to see more. So guys, let me know what you thought of this film, and let me know if you enjoyed it. And thank you guys so much for watching this review.